and here I will be dealing with all the receptors, the various receptors of the adrenergic system. So the first receptor group is the alpha receptors. Under alpha receptors, there are two classes, alpha 1 and alpha 2. Alpha 1 can be broadly subclassified into three types: alpha 1A, alpha 1B, and alpha 1D. Alpha 2 can be broadly subclassified into alpha 2A, alpha 2B, and alpha 2C. So all the three alpha 1 receptors, these three, all of them are GQ type of GPCR, that is G protein coupled receptor. Now, what is a G protein coupled receptor? We have all learned it in physiology, that suppose this is the cell membrane, then G protein coupled receptors are also called serpentine receptors because they make 7 passes through the cell membrane. Yeah, this is the receptor pedestal for binding to the ligand, and here there are 3 subunits: beta, gamma, and the most important, alpha. Now if it is a GQ type, then this alpha will be alpha Q. If it is GS type, this alpha subunit will be alpha S, and if it is GI type, it will be alpha I. Okay. Now I'll just just discuss briefly with regards to these G protein coupled receptors, because they are asked in your general pharmacology portion as well. Stimulation of the GQ type will activate an enzyme known as phospholipase C. This will convert membrane phospholipid PIP2, that is phosphatidyl inositol 4,5-bisphosphate, into IP3, that is inositol triphosphate, and DAG, which is diacyl glycerol. This IP3 will open IP3 gated calcium channels of the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, leading to efflux of calcium into the cell cytoplasm, and DAG will activate protein kinase C, which will activate a host intracellular cascade, various downstream enzymes. Okay. And this calcium will also activate an intracellular cascade, and it will also cause actin myosin cross linking, which will in turn lead to muscle contraction. Okay. The GS type, when stimulated, will activate an enzyme known as adenylate cyclase, which will in turn convert ATP to cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP will activate various intracellular kinases. The GI type, when stimulated, stimulated, will result in a decrease in cyclic AMP levels, and also it will open potassium channels. So basically it will antagonize the effects of the GS type. Now there are two more types of G protein coupled receptors, that is the GO type. GO type, when stimulated, now in all the previous G protein coupled receptors, the alpha subunit will dissociate from the beta and gamma subunit and activate the various enzymes which I've mentioned, like the phospholipase C and the adenylate cyclase. But in case of GO, the beta and gamma subunit will dissociate, and on one hand it will block the calcium channels, and on the other hand it will open potassium channels. Okay, and there is the fifth type of G protein coupled receptor, which is called G1213. G1213. Now it has a very interesting function. Stimulation of G1213 will convert a protein known as Rho, which is coupled with GTP, to Rho GTP. Rho GTP will activate an enzyme known as Rho kinase, which will in turn lead to vasoconstriction. Yes. Now, why I'm saying is that this pathway is now being targeted by various drugs for the treatment of glaucoma, angina. So there is this drug called nitasudil, which is a Rho kinase inhibitor. And is used in the treatment of glaucoma. And there is another drug known as fasudil, which is also a Rho kinase inhibitor, which is used in the treatment of angina. Okay, so that's with respect to the G protein coupled receptors. Now I deliberately discussed the physiology because it will be helpful in understanding their functions. Now let's come to the locations. The alpha 1A, it is found in the prostatic urethra. It is found on the bladder sphincter. And it is also found in the liver, where it controls gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. Yes. So obviously stimulation of alpha 1A will cause contraction of the prostatic urethra, will cause contraction of the bladder sphincter, and will also promote gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis in the liver. The alpha 1B receptors are found primarily on the blood vessels, and obviously stimulation of alpha 1B will cause vasoconstriction and will lead to increased blood pressure. The alpha 1D are found on the blood vessels, writing BB for short, the prostatic urethra and the bladder. So like I said, blood vessels, prostatic urethra, there will be vasoconstriction, and contraction of the prostatic urethra will lead to obstruction to urinary flow. Okay. Now this is not found on the bladder sphincter. Okay, it's found on the bladder, so it will promote contraction of the bladder. Yeah. Next, now these all, I'll just reiterate that these all are GQ type. Yes. Now let's move to the alpha 2A. Just 1 minute. Yes. Now here I didn't mention whether these are GI type or GS type or GQ type. The reason for that, most students when asked what is what type of GPCR is alpha 2, they will answer it's a GI type. Okay, that is, yes, most commonly alpha 2 receptors are GI type, but that is only when they are present presynaptically, meaning suppose this is the presynaptic neuron, this is the postsynaptic neuron. Now the vesicle here fuses and releases its contents. It will bind to the receptors. Some contents will go back and bind to this receptor present presynaptically, is called an autoreceptor. This will in turn inhibit release of catecholamines. Okay, so it's called an autoreceptor because it will inhibit its own release. It's a is a GI type, but this is true for alpha A and most of alpha C. They are GI type which are present presynaptically and are autoreceptors. Alpha 2B is present postsynaptically and it is a GQ type of receptor. Now what are their specific locations? Coming to that, yeah, so the alpha 2A is found primarily on the presynaptic adrenergic neurons. Presynaptic neurons, and they are autoreceptors GI type. Alpha 2B are found on the blood vessels. They are GQ type and they cause vasoconstriction, VC for short. Okay. And alpha 2C are found in the CNS and adrenal medulla. They are all GI type, mostly GI type, and they will inhibit release of the catecholamines. The alpha 2A receptors may also be found on the blood vessels, and when they are found on the blood vessels they become GQ type. Okay, I initially by mistake I told the alpha 2C are mostly GI type and some may be GQ type, but it's not so. The alpha 2A are mostly GI type and all of alpha 2C are GI type. Alpha 2A may be found on the blood vessels and at that time they are GQ type. Okay, so from this, just from this you can understand that alpha 1A blockers, okay, may be used in case of BPH. You can also understand why in case of incontinence SNRIs are used. Okay, and also why as a side effect of alpha 1A blockade there may be hypoglycemia. And you can also understand why alpha 1 blockers are used for the treatment of hypertension. In fact, the drug of choice for hypertension with dyslipidemia are alpha 1 blockers. Now, why this dyslipidemia comes into the picture? This is because insulin release is decreased by both alpha 2A and alpha 2B. We all know insulin causes lipogenesis and all that. So because of those things, the drug of choice for hypertension with dyslipidemia is alpha 1 blockers. Now let's move on to the beta receptors. Okay, I hope it's clear till now. Again, I'll just try to clear this point. Why did I say that alpha 1 blockers are used and insulin release is decreased by alpha 2 and alpha 2B? This is because the theory is that alpha 2 blockade, the alpha 1 blockade will lead to overstimulation of these alpha 2 and alpha 2B. Okay, so yeah, now let's move on to the next group of receptors, that is the beta receptors. All the beta receptors are GS type. They are primarily of three types: beta 1, beta 2 and beta 3. Beta 1 are found in the heart, and we have all learned in physiology what's their function. They increase the contraction, conduction and the heart rate, inotropic, chronotropic, these effects. Then they are found in the JG cells, juxtaglomerular cells of the kidney, where they stimulate renin release. The beta 2 receptors, when present in the heart, they promote contraction of the heart and also to some extent the conduction and heart rate. When they are also found in the skeletal muscles, where they again increase contraction. But on the blood vessels, they cause vasodilatation. On the bronchus, they are present in the bronchus, they cause bronchodilation. That is why your beta 2 agonists are used in the treatment of asthma. They are also found on the uterus, causing relaxation, also known as tocolysis. They are also found on the liver, promoting gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, and are also found on the pancreas, where stimulate insulin release. Yes, that is why we are often asked a question why propanolol and insulin are rather why in a diabetic patient propanolol should be avoided. So I'll come to that. I'll come discuss that later. And the beta 3 receptors are primarily found on the adipocytes, where they promote lipolysis, and they're also found on the detrusor muscles. That is why a new drug has been developed, which is a beta 3 agonist. This is known as mirabegron. Okay, it causes detrusor relaxation and used in case of urinary retention to empty the bladder. Okay, so these are with respect to the beta receptors. The beta receptors, the beta blockers, which I will be discussing later, are, in my opinion, the most important group of drugs we'll study in the autonomic nervous system. There are a lot of drugs with varying function, and you have to remember all of that. Initially it will be difficult, but soon you'll get used to it. And finally, there are the dopaminergic receptors. Excuse me. Yeah, the dopaminergic receptors, primarily of 5 types: D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. The most important of them are D1 and D2. Okay, this is a GS type, this is a GI, this is also GI, this is also GI, this one is GS. Yeah, D1 and D2. D1 is found on the JG cells as well, and that is why dopamine is often used in case of oliguria, because the D1, it stimulates the D1 receptors, and dopamine is the drug of choice in case of congestive heart failure with oliguria. Okay, and D2 are primarily found in the CNS, where they inhibit the release of dopamine, and it's very important in a variety of CNS diseases, and I'll cover that in the CNS portion. Okay, so that's that. I'm keeping this video short.